At this point, we have seen the rise of Blizzard North from their hit game, Diablo. We had also seen how they had split apart and tried to go their own way by way of flagship studio, the results of which were two games that were later released by a Korean company. From here we see a team of developers from this history who would come to form Relic Entertainment and to try once more to recapture the glory. With their goal of releasing an MMORPG, they decided to set their sights on releasing a game that they can complete in less than a year. The single-player version of what was to be called Torchlight was intended to be released to the general public ahead of the MMO. Full production of Torchlight steamed ahead through November of 2008. The result? Torchlight was largely another success, one that had eluded the team from their days of flagship. They seemed to learn their lesson. The PC release received 83 out of 100 on Metacritic and almost an 84% on game rankings. The reviewers had quickly caught on to the team's Diablo connections, noting the Diablo-like gameplay, some even calling it a Diablo clone. It was around 2009 when Chinese-based company Perfect World had entered into an agreement to publish Torchlight to a worldwide audience. About 1 year later, Perfect World would purchase a majority stake in Runic Games to the sum of $8.4 million. It was announced as a strategic investment in order to develop Perfect World's R&D. The announcement was during the time when Runic Games was in development of the MMO version of Torchlight. However, the games to release the MMO were scrapped. It was a move that was panned by both critics and fans. On August 10th, Runic had instead announced they were in development of the sequel, Torchlight 2. This sequel would have multiplayer support and provided the development team with the experience they needed to create a multiplayer game on the scale required from the MMO they had hoped to achieve. The long-term goal would have been to take what they have learned from Torchlight 2, put it all towards the Torchlight MMORPG. In 2011, then company president Travis Baldry, the creator of Fate and the lead developer of the game Mythos, delayed the release of Torchlight 2 to allow further beta testing and polishing off the bugs in the game. A noticeable feature of Torchlight 2 was the inclusion of the animated sequences, which was produced by Clay Entertainment, a company that I have reviewed in an earlier video. Torchlight was made available for pre-purchase on Steam in April of 2012 and finally released on September of that same year. It would also find its way towards a physical release on IndieBox. The result? Torchlight 2 was another hit for Runic. On Metacritic, the game attained an overall score of 88 out of 100 based on reviews from 65 professional critics. Game Informer gave Torchlight 2 high praises, calling it an excellent game no matter how you slice it. IGN praised the game, stating, quote, "Torchlight 2 doesn't do anything radically new, but does everything incredibly well. It fits all the pieces of a varied monster behavior, interesting items, excellent skill design, and random surprises together into a near-perfect formula, where the action never stops and rewards are never far away." Other reviews have also pointed out how Torchlight 2 seems to maintain the status quo of the genre, not offering any new surprises, innovations, and what have you. It was just a fun game. Having played Torchlight 2 in a shadow of the final game that was to come from Runic, I am inclined to agree. Torchlight 2 is fun, but it definitely was lacking something. Using the mouse and keyboard as controls might have been part of that. Perhaps I should have used a D-pad instead. Having little experience in the genre, my only prior experience was in Atlantica Online, which actually is an MMORPG. The controls and interface of which didn't feel too different than those with Torchlight 2. Still, I do prefer playing a single-player version of Torchlight 2 and would like to actually finish the game one day. So what about the promise of a Torchlight MMORPG? Apparently, by the time Torchlight 2 had been released, Runic Games had stated that they will probably will not be developing any MMO in the near future. We will soon see the consequences of that decision. So, what happened instead? Runic had started developing plans for a game in a wholly different genre, and for once, not a Diablo clone or lookalike. Clearly, they had wanted to expand their horizons. The game was to have been set in space, and then the development team had changed forever. Travis Baldry, who had been with the development team ever since Flagship Studios' ill-fated Mythos, and Eric Schaefer, who had been with the team since the very beginning, had both left the company and would go on to form their own studio. The studio would be Double Damage Games, and the game ended up being Rebel Galaxy. This left Runic in a state of trying to keep itself together, and they would do it in what was to be their final game, Hob. A game that I am actually a big fan of. Max Schaefer had admitted that Travis Baldry had stuck out like a sore thumb among the development team. Travis was a jack of all trades and loved to be involved in all aspects of game development. Max stated that Travis's departure from the company didn't really come as a surprise. The leadership vacuum, however, became a problem. The studio had depended on Travis and Eric Schaefer when other games had gone through. Now they're no longer in the company, and Runic had no one to replace them with. Runic had to deal with some other internal grumblings, and some of the development team had been sacked. As it turns out, this may have played out in favor of Runic. With Torchlight under their belts, and with the company set to do something other than RPGs, the personnel and leadership shakeup meant the studio can finally take on a new, fresh genre of gaming. The team had wanted to develop a single-player game filled with mystery. There would be no dialogue, and the player would have the freedom to explore and figure out what's going on. The management worked with the team in studio to talk about the ideas, and several project leads went off-site to work on the specifics. The game that came out of all this work would be called Hob. The studio had taken a big risk with this game. There was no Kickstarter campaign. There was no publisher. Hob was self-funded. A lot was riding on the game, and it was a game that the game developers themselves had believed in. Being their final game, the reviews came in being generally favorable, scoring with a 77 with Metacritic. The axe fell in November of 2017, 1 month after Hob had been released. Perfect World Entertainment had announced that they were closing 2 studios at this time. Motiga, who has released the shooter game Gigantic, and Relic Entertainment. Perfect World had wanted to focus on online games as a service, and simply, Runic had not been going in that direction. Perfect World had stated that Runic Games will continue as part of the company. It is worth noting, however, that they had also shut down Runic's sole location. So that's it! The curtain closes on Runic. When it comes to news stories about money coming in from other countries, bigger companies buying a controlling interest in smaller companies and the like, people do tend to naturally react to the news negatively. Concern at best, a fear of conspiracy at the worst. When big money came into play with Flagship Studios, and then again with Runic, those fears have been played out online on some foreign discussion boards. The truth, as it often turns out, wasn't so simple, and the case can easily be made to not to rush to conclusions. However, the writing was on the wall. The doors of Runic were closed, and the team of developers would part ways. So, where is everybody these days? Blizzard Entertainment is still around with massive hits such as, StarCraft, Diablo 3, and a little thing called World of Freaking Warcraft. David Brevik, the man who conceived the massively popular Diablo, is still in the business as a programmer and president of his company, Greybeard Games. As mentioned before, Eric Schaefer and Travis Baldree had released Rebel Galaxy through Double Damage Games. Travis Baldree had also branched out into the world of audiobook narration, starting with July 2017's release of Last Good Place. There was another bright spot with this development team. Bill Roper, the man who had served as creative executive at Blizzard Entertainment with Diablo, and then went on to become CEO of Flagship Studios, he went under the umbrella of Perfect World, but not with Relic Entertainment. He would become the chief creative officer of another company called Cryptic Studios, who would release such hits as City of Heroes and Neverwinter. He went over to Disney Interactive in 2011 as VP, then on to Marvel Games with a promotion. In May of 2015, he moved to DCPI Labs and finally at Improbable as Chief Creative Officer as of June 2017. A company focused on large-scale cloud-based virtual world simulators. So this is the end of the story of Runic, Torchlight 2, and Hob. Well, that's it for now, and thank you so much for watching.